Financial planning and security can sometimes be seen as a moving target. The rules change constantly, and you need guidance to stay ahead of the market moves. This is the Lebenthal Report with industry veterans Michael Hartzman and Dominic Tavella. We'll break down the news, trends, and overall direction of the markets, telling you what may be coming next, investment opportunities, and what to avoid. Now, here are your hosts, Dominic Tavella and Michael Hartzman.
All right, I'm Michael Hartzman. Today is Tuesday, June 30th, 2026. Along with my partner, Dominic Tavella. Welcome to the Lebenthal Report. How are you, Dom?
Doing well, Mike. Like everybody else, trying to get ready for a holiday weekend coming up, but no complaints on my part.
Good to hear. Let's just jump into it. We have a lot to talk about tonight. Tonight, the first half of the market year, or the year in general, actually, is over. And let's just get to the numbers, Dom, because they're a little perplexing. I need you to shed a little light on what happened in the first half of the year. So the Dow Jones was up 8.9% the first half of the year. That's the best performance since 2021, by the way. The S&P 500 year to date is up 9.4%, and the NASDAQ is up 12.8%, which is great in and of itself, Dominic. But what's really remarkable is you and I are old enough to remember that a war started literally on the last day of the end of the first quarter, and the market tanked that day. So, according to Mr. ChatGPT, the markets easily weathered early Q1 drops and a brief spike in oil prices caused by tensions involving Iran. So I'll ask you the dumb question. If I asked you on March 30th, how much would the market be in 3 months, would you have predicted 9% for the Dow, almost 10% for the S&P, and almost 13% for the NASDAQ?
No. And that's the easy answer, Mike. You don't need GDP for that one. But it really, the deeper dive answer is you would have had to tell me how will the war in the Middle East outcome look like? And then we would have a much more accurate answer. And so clearly the early days of the war, and you are correct, the market reacted all across the board, down about 10% from the high at the end of March. And then the market, which is a classic market pullback when you have a lot of unknown. In this case, obviously, what was going to happen militarily, oil prices, energy across the world, blah, blah, blah. The outcome has been relatively positive. And I think the markets are taking it in stride. And that's probably the most surprising thing, Mike, is that the markets seem to be taking the outcome relatively in stride.
I would agree with you mostly, but I would say I don't know if the outcome has been positive. I think the outcome has been way less bad than it could have been.
Better phrasing than mine, Mike. Clearly, the 10% pullback we had in March was classic textbook market reaction. Hey, I don't know what's going to happen. Let me take some money off the table. Let me park it off to the side. Then I'll figure it out. And certainly, if the news outcome had been worse, you could have easily predicted a 20% correction, right? How many times have we seen that in our careers?
Mm-hmm.
When we went through the invasion in Iraq, when we went through the whole exercise in Afghanistan, markets pull back, people raise cash, they park it off to the side, and then when the news is better or worse than expected, the market will react accordingly. And I dare say that I don't say it's good news, but it's better than perhaps what the markets might have anticipated.
Yeah, and the only reason I say that is because I think at best the ceasefire is tenuous. And the administration, I don't think no less than 25 or 30 times said there was going to be an agreement signed, and it finally was signed. thank goodness. But yeah, I mean, I think it was appropriate. We went in, hot. We dropped a lot of bombs, and I think getting that done quickly, in hindsight, was certainly positive, because then it wasn't this kind of week to week, day to day drum roll of bombs, dropping, and thank God, or the loss of life is tragic. I mean, we've and not one life. One life is too many, but it's been minimal up until this point as well.
Again, Mike, our hearts break for our own soldiers. I think at last count, there were 13 that passed. But the overall magnitude of and dominance of U.S. and Israeli forces really have put Iran at the negotiating table. Now, where it goes from here and how long it's going to drag out, we deal with that question every day. But at least for now, you can argue it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah. And just for switching gears, here's another conundrum about the market, Dom. The Magnificent Seven, those big seven hyperscaler, gigantic.
Must own, right, Mike? You have to have them.
Right. They've been relatively flat this year. And I think you said this morning, they're actually, in their totality, a little underwater. But here's the other interesting part about the market the first half of the year. The tech sector by itself, Dom, is up 25.8% through tonight, with the chip makers, leading the way, other than NVIDIA, which has been kind of flat. So, the kind of other, I'll use the word mystery again, is that the market has done well without the market leaders from the last several years, which I think is good.
Look, we in many now years have been talking about how concentrated the S&P has been and how the market weighting of the Magnificent Seven have basically driven the bus. This year, it's been almost the exact opposite, right? In the tech sector, we are dealing with two basic kinds of companies. The haves, i.e., we're selling computer chips, and the have-nots, we're buying computer chips. And here's a shocker. Most of the Magnificent Seven, when you think of an Amazon, you think of a Meta, you think of a Microsoft, Google, they're buyers. And so they're the ones spending the money. The chip producers are the one manufacturing, selling the chips. They're in hot demand. So the chip manufacturers have done extremely well. They're the ones getting the bulk of the money. And the spenders in this case, hey, are you spending wisely? Are you putting the money in the right spot? Is it going to make you money someday? And they've underperformed on a year-to-date basis by a large amount, In fact, as of Friday, the Magnificent Seven were down. They were negative, Mike, for about 6% for the year. So way underperforming the S&P 500.
Yes, but overall, and we talk about this all the time, if you've owned them for several years, you are still way up and really have nothing to complain about, that performance, and they'll see their day in the sun again. And they've gone down for various reasons. I mean, Google had an amazing run, so you could argue some people taking some profits. Apple, announced a price increase, so that stock got punished. So if you look at them individually, you can understand the logic why they've all kind of taken a breather. But I think, again, if I said to you in January that the tech sector is going to be up 25% and the Mag 7 would be not participating, I think you would have easily taken the other side of that bet.
You couldn't be more right, Mike. The idea that because of the market weighting of these seven companies, that the S&P would be plus as much as it is, and they would be flat to negative year to date, you almost would argue that's not possible. The math there is not possible. On the other hand, the chip companies have done 20, 30, 50, 100% year to date. And the other parts of the market are really starting to participate because the economy and earnings have been pretty good. So kind of counterintuitive, but yeah, we're dealing with a scenario where if you only own those kind of companies, maybe you're not doing so well this year. But if you had a good broad-based portfolio, you're having a pretty good year.
I know we're bumping up against our first break, and it's our good friend Harold Balachi. So I'm going to keep him waiting an extra 3 minutes because I want you to explain to our listeners and clients the difference between the market weight S&P 500 and the equal weight S&P 500. Because when the Mag 7 were leading the way, the market weight S&P 500 was the way to go. And now, Dom, with the market spreading out, the opportunity spreading out, I think you could argue the equal weight S&P 500 at the moment is having its day in the sun. So
Well,
why
and
don't
not
you
only
shed a
that,
little
Mike, it's
light on that?
actually outperforming. Thanks for bringing that up. It's out. So market weight is the size of the company. So when you're dealing with these 7, 10 companies in total, they represent 40% of the total value that is represented by the S&P 500. So you're talking about trillion-dollar companies, but the 500th company on the S&P maybe is only $1 billion, right? So the weighting of the mass of just these 7 to 10 companies just represent, in value terms, a big percentage of the value of the total S&P 500, the market weighting one. So if they go up or down, they're going to weigh more on the market than the rest of the 293 companies. Equal weighted, we're going to count every single company the exact same percentage, and usually that's why the equal weighted S&P underperforms. But this is the power of your question, Mike. This year the market weighted S&P is up just less than 9%. The equal weighted, first time I've seen this in a long time, Mike, is up over 12% year to date.
Yeah, look, that's phenomenal, Dom. And look, I remember in the beginning of 2023 when the market started to recover, you and I took a little heat from our clients because the Mag 7 was pulling 493 companies along. And our clients wanted to know why didn't we go all in? Why didn't we see that? We saw it, it just made us a little nervous. So
if I could just add to that comment, Mike, I'm sorry, because I know we're on a time constraint, because we would have had to have 40% of your money in those 7 stocks in order to capture the same return. And we run diversified portfolios. We don't put all your eggs in one basket. So yeah, it's a question we used to get all the time. And now the pretty much the pendulum has flipped, right? Where the market weighted ones are underperforming and the rest of the market's doing relatively well. And I think most clients should be pretty happy with their first 6 months of this year's market performance.
Yeah, I'm not getting any complaints. So moving on, we frequently, after been doing the podcast for so many years in a row, we frequently have what we call friends of the show, and they are generally friends of us. Friends we see all the time. Tonight's guest is always someone who gets a lot of listeners, and I'm gonna designate him an honorary member of Lebenthal Financial, because not only is he a friend of the show, but he's literally advised, I think at this point, several hundred of my clients and your clients. So Harold Balachi is the founder and an estate and trust attorney on Long Island, founder of Harold Balachi and Associates. And we will be right back with Harold, giving us an update on all things related to estate planning, trust planning, and Medicaid planning.
You are listening to the Lebenthal Report. If you have any questions or comments, please send an email to contact@lebenthal.com. Now, back to the Lebenthal Report.
All right, I'm Michael Hartzman, back with my partner Dominic Tavella on the Lebenthal Report. And our guest this evening, honorary member of Lebenthal, Harold Balachi, founder, owner, extraordinaire lawyer of Harold Balachi and Associates.
You're very generous.
Welcome
Thank you
back,
for the
Harold.
membership interest. That's great to be back. Thank you.
You're not getting a K1 though, so don't get too excited.
Oh, all right. Next year.
Next year. So welcome back as always. All
Thank
kidding aside, our show with you always gets a lot of listeners, more than many, quite frankly. So let me just start from 30,000 feet in the air. What's new?
What's new? The demand for estate planning is elevated. It's good. People are paying attention to your show and to our advice and recognizing that no time like the present to write some things down, protect your assets, consolidate, and make sure that your wishes are taken care of.
So Harold, I want to bet, I know I'm going to say I'm getting older, we're getting a little older, our clients are getting a little older, and I got to believe this, next to what's going on in the markets, this is the most common question we get, Mike, would you say?
Yes.
What do I need to do? What documents do I need to make sure are in order? So I know we talked a lot about this, but why don't we start there, Harold? What documents do we got to make sure are in place?
So the four basics: your healthcare proxy, which some people call a living will. That's a document that designates somebody, generally a spouse or family member, to make decisions regarding your healthcare. They're very important. If you're in an emergency room, you're likely having some diminished capacity. So you want somebody there to be able to speak with doctors. And this also contemplates end-of-life treatment, which is very important. The whole pull the plug, who's going to pull the plug, what kind of life-sustaining treatment do you want? And that's an important designation because people view those end-of-life situations very differently. So having that conversation with family members, I think, is very important. And I think people should take healthcare designations far more seriously. A lot of people just scribble them out when they go for an inpatient proceeding. It's something you should think about, especially as you age and depending on how you're aging. Everyone should have a power of attorney. In New York, we have a statutory form, durable general power of attorney. Again, this just designates individuals to take care of your finances and your business. So a healthcare proxy deals with your body and your health. Power of attorney deals with your finances, your assets. Primarily, a power of attorney is used by someone in the family to pay your bills during a period of incapacity or a period of diminished capacity. Importantly, the power of attorney cannot be used after you die. So that's something, that document is for when you're living. I'm a trust and estate attorney, guys, so you know what I'm going to say next. Everybody needs a last will and testament. And my preference is, in addition to a will, a fair number of people should be using some type of trust instrument to pass their assets to the next generation. And if I could take a line from your playbook, update your beneficiary designations. Call Lebenthal today and say, are my beneficiary designations updated and current? Not having current beneficiary designations, even on one account, can sort of nullify any work you've done. You've done all this work to have a will and a trust, and now you have something that you haven't taken care of. So big fan of beneficiary designations. They go direct to beneficiary, no probate, no trust. So if you're listening, please update beneficiary designations on all financial instruments.
You know, it can be a very uncomfortable conversation. I just had a client last month whose younger sister of 8 years passed away.
Oh.
And my client does not have any children. So I said to her, look, I'm sorry for your loss. And I hate for you to think about it right now, but who are your new beneficiaries?
Right.
And the thought that she even had to go down the list of people she probably doesn't like and now leave money to, right, is an uncomfortable thing. But we the three of us have a responsibility to, not wait on that conversation. You and I, Harold, had a situation where we had a client I referred to you. Unfortunately, one of the children was left out of everything, and then that child is back in good graces and back in the family fold, and we had to scramble to get that person back on all the documents before his dad passed away, which also just happened. So we constantly deal with these scenarios and are kind of forced to have these conversations with people when they don't want to and they're feeling quite vulnerable about it.
I agree. And to your point, it's an even harder conversation when you don't have lineal heirs,
Mhm.
or if there's some discord taking place in the family. And generally, I'm sure your experience as well is people delay making decisions because of some underlying concern, disagreement, lack of trust, superstition. I joke, I'm a real treat to talk to at 10 o'clock on a Monday morning. I'm asking you, do you want to be kept alive? Where do you want to be buried? Who's getting all your money? But these are adding beneficiary designations. It's ministerial. Do it. It's easy. It reflects your wishes. You can change them over time. It's just one of the most important things you can do.
Dom, can I just ask him one other follow-up question?
Absolutely.
Harold, I want you to talk about the bad things that could happen or the unwanted events that can happen if you die without a beneficiary.
So if you die without a beneficiary, the asset, the account, let's just call it your Lebenthal account, becomes part of your residuary estate, meaning something that's left over that hasn't been spoken for or designated to an individual. If you have a last will and testament, that account is going to be distributed through the residuary clause of the will that says I leave the residue and remainder to my 3 children in equal shares. If you don't have a will, that account is going to be distributed through intestacy laws in New York, which will follow your bloodline, and it's a logical family tree, but it's not always what you want. It's not always your siblings or your nieces and nephews. And the law oftentimes gives money to people that you would not have. So that's what can happen. And it can really turn into a nightmare scenario because there are certain people who are just adamant that certain members of their family should not inherit for whatever reason. And they could take a piece of it. So it can get very ugly very quickly, especially for other family members who are just confused about why this has taken place, why the beneficiary designation wasn't there, why they have to share. And oftentimes people will say to me, and this is taking place on a few files right now, well, my sister said that my kids would get the house. Good. That's not what the law says. The law says that your kids have to share it with their cousins because your sister didn't have a will. That's probably not what your sister wanted, but she didn't have a will. So now her estate's being diluted among a class of individuals that may or may not have reflected the decedent's wishes. And that's sad on for a lot of different reasons. And it's also frustrating for the survivors who've been told. How many times does somebody come in and say, well, Dad said I was getting the IRA, but you're not. And then we look at, and how do we answer it? We tried. It's very hard. So this is a very easy ministerial task that avoids all of what we just talked about. It's so important.
Harold, I just want to expand on that question because we know client comes in, it's a beneficiary from an IRA or a TOD, a transfer upon death form, takes them 10 seconds to complete it, sign it, can update it anytime they want. There's no cost, no charge. And here's the best part. God forbid something happens to the client. I won't say instantaneous, but what, Mike, a week we get the account transferred to the beneficiary?
Yeah. Well,
If
once we get the death certificate, once we get the death certificate,
So
it's a week or less.
as you implied, no beneficiary, how long would you say on the average it takes to get that account transferred to the beneficiary? Harold, how long would you say is the average?
I love what you just said. Beneficiary designations, it's like ready money. It's there. It really depends. As you both know, I've been a fairly vocal critic of New York's surrogate courts and the delays that are imposed by them. At the minimum, you're probably looking at 2 to 3 months now, and that's assuming everything is done very quickly and all the documents are in place. If there's any type of hiccup, you could be looking at 6 to 12 months. As you know, I've been a critic, but I will give credit. New York courts, the surrogate courts downstate here are acting much faster on our petitions. So the wait time is significantly reduced.
So you could have your beneficiaries get their money within a week, 10 days, or
you could pay me to
months.
do it and sit around and wait for a few months and then, call me and say, where's my money? Well, we're waiting on a court, and their urgency, unfortunately, is not ours. That's a sad reality.
Harold, we went through this with my own family. If you recall, my parents' co-op in Brooklyn, the co-op board would not let us, if you recall, put their apartment in a trust.
Yeah.
And by the way, today would be my mom's 98th birthday had she lived.
God bless B. Bless her. All right, love her.
Love her. But when she passed, it wasn't their fault. We tried, but we had to wait for, I guess it was Brooklyn's surrogate court to name my brother and I the executors. And my brother and I had to pay for the upkeep of that co-op for probably 6 months, which was money that just went out the window, right? So talk for a little bit more about the importance of the irrevocable trust, which is like a beneficiary, but you mentioned it earlier. It's all about probate avoidance and avoiding what I had to go through. And I do this for a living.
Right. And this was a challenge for you. This was a burden for you. You're blessed to have resources. What if you don't have the liquidity to maintain the maintenance on an apartment or maintain the taxes on real property and the utilities? This is a very common problem where somebody passes, heirs don't have the financial resources to carry a property. It doesn't necessarily jeopardize the asset, but it just adds to further expenses, fees, delays, costs. So you're burning money unnecessarily. So how to avoid probate: beneficiary designations and some type of trust planning. For our conversational purposes, our favorite trusts are revocable living trusts and irrevocable trusts. They both give the same level of probate avoidance, meaning when the creator of a trust, who's also called a grantor or a settlor, passes, their successor trustee, under the law, has immediate authority to act. And I give a great example where a client passed and they were in contract to sell a house. And the daughter, who was the successor trustee, was able to close on that deal about 3 days after her mother passed because she was the successor trustee. Had that asset not been in trust, it very well could have taken another 6 to 12 months of surrogate court work to give her the authority to sell that asset. So the time value and the financial value of probate avoidance is priceless, in my judgment. I think you'd agree.
Yeah, 100%. I lived it. I 100%
Yeah,
agree.
you've been through it.
Harold, I'm gonna throw you a curveball, but basically our listeners, okay, because we have tons of clients, they own vacation homes in other states. Tell me about that headache.
First of all, I'm envious. But number two, whenever you own real property in another state, and remember, let's remind our listeners, what's really the primary thing you cannot put a beneficiary on, and that's real property. And for lots of different reasons, we don't put other people's names on our deeds. So now you're a resident of New York and you have a vacation home in Florida and you pass away, and we do probate in Suffolk County, and it took us 6 months. And now we have to go through ancillary probate in Florida, which could take another several months, if not longer. As a probate attorney, I have always found ancillary probate more challenging than regular probate, both when I'm trying to do ancillary in another state or when I'm doing another state's work in New York. It delays things more significantly. So that is certainly a trigger. Out-of-state property is always a trigger to me to have some type of trust in place for that very reason.
Harold, rather than getting into another topic and bumping up against a break, delaying it, why don't we just take a break right now, and we'll be back with Harold Bellacci, founder and owner of Bellacci Law.
You are listening to the Lebenthal Report. If you have any questions or comments, please send an email to contact@lebenthal.com. Now, back to the Lebenthal Report.
All right, I'm Michael Hartzman, back with my partner Dominic Tavella on the Lebenthal Report with our guest this evening, Harold Bellacci. Harold, let me ask you this. The federal state tax number is very, very high these days. What is it, $15-16 million?
Yeah, it's 15 million per person.
15 million per person. So let's just face it. Most of us do not have $15 million. Most couples do not have 30. However, in the state of New York, it's much, much lower. There's something called the cliff. And, you know, Dominic and I pat ourselves on the back. We have potentially, through a great market and a great economy, have probably bumped a few of our clients over the New York State threshold. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about, you might be okay with the federal number. You might think you don't have to pay any estate tax. The children of beneficiaries are fine. And most people never think about their home state. So can we get into that a little bit?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I think that the 15 million is aspirational. The estate tax is always a great conversation piece. Federally, I think only 2,000 or 3,000 federal estate taxes are filed per year. That's a very high number to get to. But on the other hand, New York, which is where the three of us are located, New York is presently $7,350,000, which is about half of the federal exemption. And I'm seeing it. This bull market has really done wonders for people's account balances. Real estate prices, at least here on Long Island, just continue to grow exponentially. It's shocking what a starter home costs on Long Island. So it's really not that hard, as crazy as that sounds, for a lot of our clients to end up with $8, $9, $10 million. And they're concerned with how to mitigate a possible estate tax bill from the state of New York, which could be quite high. There are several ways to mitigate or insure against a taxable event in New York. The easiest way to do it is through your last will and testament or your revocable trust, whereby you grant an executor or a trustee the right to reduce the size of your estate by gifting to charities out of your estate. A lot of people call that a Santa Claus provision. So for example, if you passed with $8 million, your executor could give, say, 600 of it to a charity, reducing your threshold below the limit and resulting in zero tax paid. Whereas if you had not made that contribution and your estate was worth 800,000, the likelihood, excuse me, 8 million. Thank you, Michael. The tax would be about 750,000. So just using that 8 million number, there's a savings to the family by gifting money out. And for a lot of reasons, personally, I'd rather my money go to charity than the state of New York. So I think that's an important tool that people should use in planning. I'd rather people plan by reducing the size of their estate through contemporaneous gifting, through contemporaneous charitable bequests. But sometimes, the account values, if you're in some of the Mag 7 or some of the indexes that you and Dominic were talking about earlier, account values just continue to rise. So sometimes trying to mitigate through spending or gifting can be quite challenging. So it's important to have this provision in your documents. When it comes to married couples, I think it's important for your listeners to understand that unlike the federal estate tax, which is portable, meaning you inherit your spouse's exemption, that is not the case in New York. So for example, if I pass away, leaving $10 million and it all goes to my surviving spouse could have a very significant estate tax issue when he or she passes. We address that through what are called credit shelter trusts, either through a last will and testament or a revocable trust, whereby you have to do some math here, but what you're doing is you're not giving your surviving spouse the entire portion of your estate. You're retaining some of it in a trust, giving the surviving spouse income and principal invasion. But what you're doing is keeping that surviving spouse's net worth below the estate tax limit. So that's a really important feature for planning in New York State and other states where there's a state estate tax in addition, or just period.
So Hal, I hate to do this again, but maybe putting a little emphasis, because we throw these numbers around with clients and they're like, oh, that's not me, and then you go, well, what's the value of your IRA account? What's the value of your joint account? What's the value of your home? And we're starting to bump our head, right? And then you're going, oh, what about that vacation home that you own in Florida? How about the value of your small business? And all of a sudden they go, oh, wait, does that count? So maybe just spend another minute on what counts in this ball here that
I
the
count
IRS
everything.
in New York State is going to look
It's
at.
very, I'm not going to sit here and tell you what's not included. There, irrevocable life insurance policies are a way to do estate tax mitigation. Some annuities, some charitable remainder trusts. There are ways to get assets out of your name. But in general, if you're a title holder on an asset, we're going to include it in your estate tax return. When it comes to small businesses, partnerships, you can start to get into valuations, which is how some of our savvy clients, like to play around with numbers. They'll say, well, I have 5 million and I have that partnership, but I can't sell it, so it's not worth the 8 million that it's really worth. I don't like playing those games because I'm not the Internal Revenue Service and I'm not the judge and jury. You need to be a lot more proactive in reducing the size of your estate. That's a good question, Dom. I would. It's all included.
It's all included. And you brought one up that, sorry, Mike, kind of always slips through the cracks. People, husband and wife, whatever, they go and buy life insurance and they just sign at the bottom. They don't realize that the owners or the spouse is the owner of their life insurance. That $1 million policy that you bought to protect your spouse, that $1 million potentially is in your estate.
Correct. It's frustrating.
So you end up giving a third of it or a half of it to.
Right. And thankfully, a lot of our clients are blessed, and I go through the same practice, and you start adding things up, and you have very humble people saying, geez, I don't have anything near that. And it's always a pleasure on my part to say, you've got several $1 million. You're pushing the $10 million number. It's a nice problem to have, but it's something that needs to be addressed actively.
The flip side of that, guys, is I'm always happy to deliver the news to maybe children or a cousin or a grandchild when they may have inherited, I don't know, $800,000, $900,000, $1 million, and they ask me, well, how much am I going to owe in estate taxes? How much are you going to owe the government? And I'm always so happy when I'm able to say nothing. And so many people just assume that they're going to inherit money, they're going to have to pay taxes on it. And I was stunned, going back to what you said a few minutes ago, that 2,000 or 3,000 a year federal estate taxes are filed. With how many people in this country? 300 million people live here. But this is a hot button issue, and all we hear about is tax the rich, tax the billionaires, taxes transfer on wealth. And again, I don't want this to be political, but I'm just going to say it. More and more progressives seem to be winning office or winning at least the ability to run for office in their party. Harold, do you worry? And it always comes up every time the law expires. Are you worried more this time than in other times that the estate tax number might actually be rolled back?
I would worry in New York, depending on what's going on in the state of New York. You have a very liberal legislature. You've got the socialists in New York City. It would not be surprising to me if New York did something to try to tax estates. I don't want to speculate on what kind of numbers they might lay out, whether they just want to tax the super rich. Anecdotally, this is a concern for New York City clients, for Long Island clients. I'm sure you see people leaving New York State, and they're selling their apartments in town. They're selling their country houses. They're taking their 20, 30, 40, 50 million, and they're getting out of here. They don't want to hear about it.
I'm sorry, Harold, I'm going to interrupt you because I'm not going to rattle off which ones, but there are states in this country that have no estate death taxes.
Imagine
So
that.
zero.
Imagine that.
Can you imagine that?
No. There are, and they're very popular states. And from a lot of people's perspectives, those states are fairly well run. It is a concern. I spend a lot of time with clients talking about the possibility of wealth taxes. I call it kleptocracy. We'll have to react. It's very hard to predict what legislatures are going to do. Mondami seems to have some organization. He's getting socialists elected. That could be the trend in New York, and that would certainly cause a lot more planning and probably some wealth flight. But can I just add to what you said earlier, Michael? Isn't it great to tell people, no, you don't have a taxable event? Because everybody comes in. What do you mean I don't have to pay taxes on my inheritance? No, you're good. And that is a really pleasant part of this job. Because look, to inherit several $1 million without a taxable event, it's still a fairly generous proposition, and it's a life-changing proposition for the recipient in most cases.
Yeah, and look, it's even the first cousin who inherits $50,000, and it could be $1 million to that person. It's always very gratifying because many people in this country, just as I said earlier, just assume that if they're being handed money, Uncle Sam has their hand in their pocket.
Yeah. It's really nice to see their expressions when we tell them, you don't owe anything. Your mom and dad paid enough taxes throughout their lifetime.
Yeah.
So Howard, we talked about, I'm going to say 3-4 of the major documents you just have to have, and you emphasize that rightly so, that just go check your beneficiary forms, make sure they're updated, they're correct. I know we're running to the last few minutes here, but what else is top of your list they have to hear, they have to do?
Get organized. Get a family playbook. Write down where everything is, who's in charge, who to call. So much of what I do, and I think what you do, is helping families get organized. It is a huge gift to your family to consolidate, open the conversation. You don't have to divulge everything, but somebody should know where things are and what to do in the event of an emergency or in the event of your ultimate passing. I don't like including personal possessions in a lot of my estate documents. I'm sentimental. I like to say, if you don't want something thrown in a dumpster, write it down. And people fight over trivial things. I expect to fight over a Rolex or a piece of art, but people fight over kitchenware, appliances, clothing. Remember, people are grieving. So anything you can do in your planning to reduce that opportunity for friction is just an incredible gift to your family. Pre-plan your funeral, prepay your funeral. You don't want to be the one, oh, we cremated mom, she wanted to be buried. Nobody wants to experience that. So the more you write down and the more organized you are, the better off your family's going to be and your beneficiaries. And you're going to save people a lot of money and duress.
Harold, the reason we refer so many people to you is, number one, you're very, very good at what you do, but you're also very compassionate. And just going back, making it personal to my own parents, I could see you sitting at my parents' kitchen table, writing the list of the rings my mother wanted her 6 granddaughters to have. And you sitting there patiently hearing the story of every one of those pieces of jewelry. Yeah. So So not only is it important to have an attorney who's competent, but have one who's a good listener, who has empathy. And Dom and I are grateful that you are both of those things.
That's very generous. Thank you. I appreciate that. And likewise. I remember that. I remember that so vividly. Yeah.
Harold, again, sorry, a little humor is always good, but I had a client pass away, and just like you said, they had everything written down, and the family went and opened up the book, and the book said, "Call Dom." So I do want to emphasize, write your wishes down, right? It literally said, "Call Dom" with my business card. He'll know where everything is, but do write down the little stuff, right? Like the jewelry story you just told about, or your favorite watch, or your antique car, and just write it down, right? So this is what my wishes are. So when somebody has to explain to the beneficiaries, this is why it's going here and not there, at least there's an argument why that may not be a good argument, but there's an argument why it's going to go in that direction.
It helps, and people are very thoughtful about their personal possessions, and they're very specific. So I couldn't agree with you more. If you didn't get a ring, it's because your mother didn't want you to have it. There was a reason, or any piece of jewelry. And it's not uncommon to see sons inherit jewelry from their mothers. And sometimes the daughters are saying, well, what did he get the diamond for? It's his mother's, that's why. And he doesn't have to wear it, but it was important to his mother, and his mother wanted him to have something that was important to him. So you can't even divide it along certain lines like we used to. It's the more you write down, the better.
Yeah, that's why your conversation with my dad took 3 minutes, because my dad said, I have one grandson, give everything to Scott.
Give everything to Scott.
So look, we have literally 2 minutes. Tell people who haven't had the pleasure of working with you, Harold, how they could find you.
You're very kind. Thank you. My office is located at 400 Post Avenue in Westbury. It's BalachiLaw.com, and you can email me or call the office at 516-538-9700.
Dom, you want the last word?
Grateful to have you, Harold. Grateful that you bring these subjects up to people. And I know we get a lot of calls after we do, right, Mike? We get a lot of calls after this. And I can't stress enough, sorry, because it's like the third time, but nobody remembers who they put down as their beneficiary 10 years ago. Oh, I think it was my kids. Let's look. Let's get you a copy of the form. Update it, right? It's easy thing to do. Ask the questions.
Yep.
On that note, we are out of time. Thank you again, Harold Balachi, and Dominic and I will be back next week with a new edition of the Lebenthal Report. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, all. Thanks again, Harold.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Lebenthal Report. Dominic and Michael will be back for our next program, airing next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Time and 5 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Business Channel. Until then, have a great week. The Lebenthal Report is brought to you by Lebenthal Global Advisors, LLC, a registered investment advisor, and Lebenthal Financial Services, Incorporated, a FINRA registered broker-dealer. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered investment advice. The views expressed are subject to change based on market conditions. For more information about our qualifications and business practices, visit our website, Lebenthal.com, where you'll find links to SEC's and FINRA's official resources.